I'm going to show you a simple trick that you can use to win Connect 4 against pretty much anyone. Basically, you have to look at the parity differences between red and yellow to figure out who's going to win. In this case, I can look at the board and figure out that yellow is going to win this game because on this website, red always goes first and yellow always goes second. So I can see that when these columns are all filled up, eventually it'll get to a point where red has to move here and yellow will move here for the win. Even though the game is only halfway over, you can see that far in advance that it's inevitable. Regardless of what columns red and yellow choose to go in, the rest of the board is going to fill up and it's always going to be red's turn to go here. And you can use this for other situations as well. Whenever there's one column left in the game, because red went first, red will go first in the last column as well. And it's kind of a zigzag situation where red doesn't want to move, but they have to move, and they have to essentially give the game over to yellow for the win. Now I'm going to show you another situation. This is one where yellow, again, has 3 out of 4 to win, and they just need this one to win the game. But I can say, looking at this, that this game is actually going to be a draw because yellow is generally going to get the cells in the even numbered rows when the game is over and the last column is filled up. Let's see how it goes. This is a point where yellow can just keep going on top of red. And now yellow is going to go here, and they're going to miss this. Even though yellow was the only color that had a threat to win, they aren't going to get it because it's on an odd numbered row. And when the last column fills up, yellow's going to get the cells on the even numbered rows. So this is an important trick for winning this game, is figuring out which rows are compatible with your color and kind of planning far in advance how to set yourself up for a win. So that was 2 examples for yellow, but now I'm going to show you an example for red. Here, red has 3 out of 4 that they need, and the last cell that they need is on an odd numbered row. So this is a case where red is actually going to win because red will generally get the cells on the odd numbered rows when the end of the game comes, and there's nothing that yellow can do to stop it. It doesn't matter if yellow goes here or here. Eventually, the board is going to fill up, and yellow will have to move in that second column. And red will get the win. This is very important to realize these differences between red and yellow, because oftentimes if you're playing against someone that's decent and is not going to make any big blunders, oftentimes it's going to come down to the end game. Who is set up for the win when the board is completely full? Now this is an example that's a little more complicated. Nobody has 3 out of 4 yet, but I can say, looking at this, even though the game is only 50% progressed, that red is going to win this, and there's not really anything that yellow can do. And the reason why red is going to win is because they have these 2 pieces here and these 2 pieces here, which would kind of intersect here. And if red were to get this cell, then they would have a fork here, where they would win with either this one or this one. So basically, it doesn't even matter how this column fills up. As long as red gets one of these, it's guaranteed that they'll have a threat here on this odd numbered row, which is good for red. So you can see how it plays out again. As usual, it doesn't really matter where yellow goes because the game is pretty much locked into place. You see yellow did go here and red went here and is now getting the threat. If red hadn't gone here and yellow had gone here, then red would have moved here and had the same threat to win on an odd numbered row, which is good for red. Another important thing to realize is that this works because there's an even number of rows. If there was an odd number of rows, the rules might be slightly different, but that's how it goes. Okay, now this is another spot that's a little bit more complicated. This is kind of a caveat to the rule I shared before. You might look at this and say, okay, red has 3 out of 4, and the one that they're missing is on the 5th row. So that might look like it's good for red because it's an odd numbered row and odd rows are good for red. But this is actually a case that's not going to go as red might have planned because red has these 2 yellow pieces that are underneath it. This is a case that you need to watch out for because normally this would be a win for red. But if you have pieces that are kind of underneath you in a certain way, it can mess things up. Let's see what happens when the board fills up. So now it's red's turn to go, and they don't want to go here because then yellow can go here and ruin the potential that red had. So red would have to go here for a chance of winning, but if they go here, then yellow can go there, which would give them 3 out of 4. And then red would have to go here and give it up to yellow again. So this is a case where red loses it because yellow has this structure underneath that's interfering. That's a draw. It turns out that if you have multiple threats, this can kind of complicate the game more, but one important rule that you should remember is if there is a threat on an even row, like this for yellow, and a threat on an odd row, like this for red, which would be a fork like I showed before. Anytime you have 2 threats like this, an even and an odd, the odd is going to basically trump the even. So even though yellow has a threat on an even numbered row, they're not going to be able to get it. And this is a game that's going to go to red. The reason why yellow doesn't get their threat is because the threat that red has is on an odd numbered row, and it's essentially cutting off an odd number of cells, so it kind of flips the parity around, where yellow won't be able to get this one until after red's gotten this one. You'll see how it goes in just a moment. Now you see red got the cell here, so now it's got the setup that it needs. And when the time comes that yellow has to make a decision, they're going to avoid going in that third from right column as long as they can. And actually they have to give up their threat because there's an odd number of cells in this column, it's flipping things around. So now red's going to get the cells in the even rows on this column. But it's just delaying the inevitable where yellow's going to have to give the win to red again. Another complication is if you have two odd threats. So before it was an even threat and an odd threat, where odd will always trump even. But there's another nuance to this rule, whereas if you have two threats on odd numbered rows, they're actually going to cancel each other out, and it's going to act like an even threat. You can see red even has a threat on this odd numbered row, but they're not going to win because yellow has two odd numbered threats. When you're playing on a game with an even number of rows, two odd threats are going to cancel each other out and act like an even threat. So you can see how this plays out when the board fills up. And you might look at these cases and think that, okay, most of these games I've shown you have been 50% over by the time I started showing, but as I said before, you can plan for these threats long in advance before all these columns are filled up to know that you're going to win. And that's the trick to winning this game against someone that's not making big mistakes, is you have to kind of be able to look farther ahead than they are. So now red has to go, and again, it's a case where they don't want to go, but they have to go. And whichever side they go on, they're giving up the win to red. Sorry, I mean to yellow. The last example I'm going to show is playing on a board with an odd number of rows. When you're playing on a game with an odd number of rows, the rules are actually flipped around a little bit. And you need to know about this if you're ever playing in the arena mode on Board Game Arena. But basically when you're playing on a 9x9 board like this, when the last column starts filling up, odd rows are still going to be good for red and even rows are still going to be good for yellow. However, some of the other nuances that I mentioned before are going to be flipped around. So if there are multiple threats, if there's an even threat and an odd threat, where maybe yellow needs a cell on this one to win and red needs one on this row to win, when you're playing on a 9x9 board, the even threat is going to trump the odd threat. So yellow would win in that case. The other difference is that if there are two even threats, those would cancel each other out on an odd, on a board that's 9x9. Whereas before, odd threats would cancel each other out. When you're playing on a board like this, odd threats will not cancel each other out. Only even threats would. Anytime you have two even threats. So this is a game that I actually played against someone in the arena mode. I'm just going to walk through my thought process to show you how you plan these things out earlier in the game. This is an opening that I normally like to play. This is with the swap rule, so I'm actually playing yellow in this game, meaning I want to give myself a threat on an even numbered row to win. This is an opening that I like for yellow. I don't really have a clear explanation for that, but this is a case where I can set myself up for a threat to win because I have two cells here taken up, and if I get this one, then I'll have 3 out of 4, and the one that I need is on the even numbered row. So this is a valid threat for yellow that can work. This is also a case where I'm kind of forcing my opponent to move here, because if red doesn't go here, then I could go here, and then I'm forking my opponent where he has to go here, and he just can't block both at the same time. So, this guy's pretty good. He knows he has to go here. And now I'm thinking I have a setup to win. I just need to play defense now and prevent my opponent from interfering with this. And as I said before, when you're playing on a board with these dimensions, two even threats would cancel each other out. So red could actually move here, giving him a threat to win, and that would cancel out mine. So it would be actually like ruining what I have set up here. So for that reason, I chose to go here to prevent him from doing that. And now the goal of my play for the rest of the game is just to prevent him from getting an even threat like that. So I'm kind of more interested in what's going on the left side. I think he made a mistake going here maybe because with me having this threat to win, this column is effectively cut off. So the only way he could stop me is if he were to get these two cells, forcing me to go here, or if he got 4 in a row or some sort of threat on this side. But he's not going to get 4 in a row with just these 3 columns. So that's one of the advantages of me having cut off this column. So again, I'm focusing primarily on the left side. I did go there just to stop him from getting a vertical 4. And now this is a case where I have to go here to stop him from getting here and forcing me to move there. And even though red has a threat here, it's on an odd numbered row. And when you're playing on a 9x9 board, even actually trumps odd. Whereas if you're playing on 7x6, odd would trump even. But actually, this is a case where even though I had the parity working in my favor, this game actually ended a lot sooner than that because I was able to set up a fork here. Where he couldn't simultaneously block both of these cells. So that's kind of an overview of what I think about playing Connect 4 and beating some stronger opponents. Hopefully this helps. Thanks for watching.